Well, most of us that are following the unfolding events in Egypt and the rest of the Middle East are now pretty much coming around to the conclusion that it's not a question of if change is going to happen, it's when, or more to the point, how fast. And for a very good analysis of this, I refer you to Dr. James Robbins' piece in the Washington Times. As you know, Dr. Robbins is the senior editorial writer for foreign affairs at Washington Times. His latest book is called This Time We Win, and he joins us now. Jim, good morning.
Hey, good morning.
I've got your piece in front of me. I want to go to the last paragraph because that I think is what I want to ask you. You're saying pushing for immediate regime change in Egypt is not in American or Egyptian interests. Cutting the legs out from an already tottering regime could easily lead to widespread violence. And I guess my question is, knowing that now and having seen the counter demonstrations yesterday, is it possible that perhaps the administration underestimated Hosni Mubarak's staying power, and we ought to be a little more mindful of that?
Yeah, I think they jumped on the demonstration bandwagon a little bit too fast, and particularly when the president in his statement said that the change of regime has to start now and emphasized now. What they did was gave a signal to the demonstrators that their time had come, that the administration was cutting its support for the regime, but also frightened the supporters of the regime into thinking the same thing, so it really amped up the level of potential violence in the situation. And actually, I wrote that paragraph before the violence broke out, so I think that then we saw what the results were.
But in terms of who this sends a signal to, if you're a demonstrator right now, I got to believe that if this is going to happen fast, the principal beneficiary would be the Muslim Brotherhood. They're the most organized. They're perhaps to some degree behind the religious aspect of this revolution, and they would, I think, be the first in line if there was some kind of transition government.
Yes, and that's a problem because the Muslim Brotherhood is going to pursue policies that really aren't in U.S. interest. There are other parties in Egypt, liberal parties, other opposition groups that would take a more pro-Western line if they came to power. But right now the Muslim Brotherhood is the largest opposition bloc and they have the upper hand. So there's really no reason for the United States to pursue the kind of policies now that would lead to them taking power later, because that's not really a group that we want to have to deal with.
We didn't really see any violence, obviously, until yesterday when the, quote, pro-Mubarak demonstrators showed up. Do we know who is involved in the pro-Mubarak demonstrations? Are they really police officers or part of the police in Egypt that have taken off their uniforms and just gone in street clothes, possibly even members of the military? Do we know who this group is?
Well, some people have been found carrying police ID. Other folks say that they're just a rent-a-mob that have been sent out there to cause trouble. But even the Washington Post has interviewed folks that are sincerely pro-Mubarak, people who don't want to see this kind of disruption. They're members of the middle class who have a lot to lose if Mubarak falls. So it's kind of a cross-section of different types. Clearly, the regime has had a past history of sending out provocateurs to cause trouble in these situations, but it would be a mistake to just write this off as a completely orchestrated crowd supporting the president.
Is there a chance, then, that perhaps the situation could cool down to the point where there wouldn't necessarily be demonstrations, but there might be some orderly discussions? Because obviously, the longer Mubarak waits, the more people are going to be out of work. They're going to be worrying about their families, their lives, stability. Obviously, they're worried about security in a situation like this. Does he profit from stretching this out a little bit?
I think he does profit from stretching it out. It allows him to get his act together and the people who might succeed him to get their act together. But I think the United States profits from dragging it out a little bit for the reasons we've discussed. You want to have an orderly transition. You want to have the right people take power. The regime right now is trying to reach out and have talks with opposition groups. But because the opposition's been emboldened by the president's statements and also statements coming from Europe saying that the transition should be quick, the opposition doesn't want to talk now. They're refusing talks. So this is not really helpful.
Now, there was a story in the Post this morning, we talked about this, Fred, about the Muslim Brotherhood and opening some kind of communication, maybe even our administration opening up a communication line with the Muslim Brotherhood. Is that a smart move, Jim, in your opinion?
Well, if they're going to come to power, it would probably be a good idea to talk to them. But unfortunately, when you do start talking to groups like this, it legitimizes them. As these reports come out, it makes them look like a viable option. And the United States should not be portraying them as a viable option because they're a hardline Islamist group. They're going to pursue policies inside Egypt that would pull Egypt back from, being a pro-Western modernizing society into being a hardcore Sharia society. And their foreign policy is one of war with Israel, which I really don't think we want.
Now, that is the one thing I want to come back to, because unlike any other nation in that part of the world, the United States has a very strong relationship with the Egyptian military, which does at least hold kind of the future of power. I cannot believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the military right now, no matter how they're aligned with Mubarak, would immediately gravitate to the Muslim Brotherhood. Knowing that, why aren't we consciously trying to keep them from forming any kind of alliance with the Muslim Brotherhood, or are we? Do you know anything that we don't?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that the military has no interest in being ruled by the Muslim Brotherhood. The military is very pro-American. We've done a lot of work with them over 30 years, had a lot of their officers over here for education and training.
Right.
And they don't want to become a Iranian-style revolutionary army. They want to be who they are, a very professional, Western-leaning, competent force.
I would also have to believe they're not excited about going to war with Israel either.
Oh, no, not at all. And it's just agitators who want that and extremists who want that. So why the administration would be doing anything to promote the interests of a group that has that as their policy is just foolish.
Yeah. All right, Jim, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Jim.
Jim
My
Robbins,
pleasure.
senior editorial writer, Foreign Affairs, The Washington Times, and also author of This Time We Win.